I'm Maddie.
I'm Amber.
And we're Witches Talking Tarot.
We are the weirdos in this one.
Like a song, like a sailor snubble. Flip the switch and let the cauldron bubble. Sam.
Wow.
Hi everyone, I'm Maddie.
And I'm Amber.
And we're
Witches Talking Tarot.
And today we're going to be talking about the creepy, the crawly Jack the Ripper.
Like, that was the only thing that felt appropriate.
Well, and theories, not just Jack the Ripper, but theories, whether you call them conspiracy theories or you just call them theories in general, that surround. Because as I was doing research on them and looking at these different theories, they didn't feel very conspiracy theory to me. They just
Well, yeah, no, they're definitely theories, although there are some that are conspiracies.
Mhm.
Some
Right,
are
like, yeah.
conspiratorial theories.
Right. So I just...
First, before we get into that, though, I just want to apologize to everybody about last week. We had some bad weather, and we did not get to record. So we do apologize for not putting anything out last week. Usually we explain why we were absent. So sorry, guys.
So, for those of you that don't know, Jack the Ripper is a notorious serial killer from 1888. 1888, yes. 1888.
August 7th, 1888 began the Whitechapel murders. And they ran at least through the end of 1888, although some murders in Whitechapel through 1891 were attributed to possibly being that of Jack the Ripper. They were similar in nature, but not exactly the same. There are 5 canonical victims I found out in this research. And those are the ones that I know of. And I thought they were the only victims. And the reason that a lot of people present them as the only victims is because it's not sure on some of the earlier ones and definitely on some of the later ones as to whether or not it was a Jack the Ripper murder or if it was just, unfortunately, a regular
You know,
murder.
Jack the Ripper vibes gives me the same vibes as that guy from New Orleans that made everybody play jazz music.
I get that.
Kind of like same vibes. I guess they both
Is that a real
terrorized...
story?
Yeah, I think so.
The jazz music one?
I think so.
I feel like when I tried to look into it, all I could find was American Horror Story stuff. But I do not like the idea of someone terrorizing an entire town, but it is a cool story. Not the murder part. Just the story part. And if it is a real story, then it's not cool. But it's an interesting story.
Yes,
you know
the
what I mean?
Axeman in the 1910s. So I guess it's kind of around the same.
He made everybody listen to jazz
The
music.
killer's letter to the newspaper claiming he would spare anyone playing jazz music on a certain night led to a famous folklore tale.
Okay, that is insane. Okay, so it was a letter. I wonder if it really... It shouldn't have happened. I don't want it to have happened. You know what? We're just going to get back to... I get where you're coming from. But for me, Jack the Ripper gives very much Summer of Sam vibes. Everybody's terrified. Everyone's afraid. Women dyed their hair in 1969 to not be a Son of Sam victim. You know what I mean? And I get that very much from, like, Jack the Ripper. Because, like, somebody, apparently, like, a famous quote around the Ripper murders is, social reformers couldn't do what Jack the Ripper did, which is get the people of London to acknowledge how bad it was in London's East End. Everybody was living in squalor. It was horrible conditions. And then things like the Ripper murders happened there. And, I found that quote very interesting because I saw that a lot in my research about how Jack the Ripper murders got the London elite to see how bad it was for the people that weren't the elites. Because, I guess up until that point, think we just, a couple months ago, we just did Scrooge, Right. He was a rich person in London didn't give crap about
Mhm.
all the lowly people. Like,
Right,
all the work
right,
farms
'cause-
are good enough for them.
Right,
you
and
know?
this would be around that same time.
Mhm.
Yeah, it was real shit.
was
back
bad.
then. It was really bad. It was so bad.
Well, and
like
I-
as in, oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, dirty conditions. Everybody's hungry. Everybody's poor.
What's it called
Yeah.
that starts with a D that you shit yourself and die? That's definitely
Dysteria.
Dysteria.
Dysentery.
Dysentery was a thing.
Sorry, that took me a minute.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like,
it was. But I mean, like, and you got to think something that I didn't know, but I learned in my research for this. Most of these women weren't hardened sex workers. Most of these women were what were referred to back then as unfortunates. They didn't have a lot of money. They weren't able to make ends meet. A lot of them had drinking problems. And so the sex work came as a side just to fill in the gaps of what they like the work that they really did through day-to-day labor and stuff. Like, one woman was a housekeeper where she lived. One woman made like flowers out of fabric and crocheted things for people for money. Like, I
that's
mean,
just
like,
so sad.
it is so sad. Like, and I mean, this is the conditions that these women lived in, and everybody in that area. And it's like, it is really sad, and it's really sad that the brutality that these women had to suffer
Mhm.
is what made the rich realize how bad it was. Like,
Isn't that what always happens, though?
if
Isn't
they
that-
ever realize, eat the rich. Sorry, I couldn't resist.
nothing positive gets the rich people's attention.
Right, but usually,
Free
well,
Luigi.
I mean, yeah.
Sorry.
Anyway, no, you're good. I was like, I'm just gonna keep rolling on because of things that we don't want to get in trouble. We're not gonna get this video taken down. I can't fully say the things that I will say off of camera, but the rich actually cared, and usually the murder of like poor people, rich people don't notice. So like, that's how brutal this was.
Right.
I mean, these women were having their organs removed.
Well, and
they were
so
having their lady parts removed.
that brings me to a theory of who the serial killer is, which we were just talking about the possibility of it being a doctor. So I was looking at all the like different theories of who it is.
The royal surgeon.
I don't think that's who it was.
I don't, but I love From Hell.
We can start with that one.
I love
Let's
that
start with
one.
that
I
one.
mean, that one's so much fun. It's the theory that because of an illegitimate child or a wedding that should not have happened between the crown prince and one of these unfortunate women, that, you know, the witnesses to said wedding had to be taken out, and you know, we get that played out for us by I can't remember her name, but Johnny Depp's the dude, and if only he had leaned into that character minus the opium usage versus the pirate, he might have better teeth right now. But From Hell, love From Hell, and that is where I learned about this theory of the royal surgeon or somebody in the royal family being the culprit, or somebody being paid by the royal family or told by the royal family being the culprit of the Jack the Ripper killings to hide something that they didn't want the mass public to know about the royal family. It's my favorite. It's not the one I think, but it's my favorite.
So
it's
I think this Dr. John Williams is probably the one that I do think, because we were talking about the possibility of a doctor. Dr. John Williams was a celebrated doctor, surgeon, and teacher in the 1880s London. Williams, this is a different Williams. In 2005, Tony Williams, a descendant of Dr. Williams, published his book called Uncle Jack. But let me explain. Dr. Williams shadowed Whitechapel. What?
Uncle Jack.
Oh, yeah?
Sorry, that was so good. I wasn't expecting that.
In the book, Williams claims that Dr. Williams shadowed Whitechapel looking for women he may have met at his clinic, okay? The claim was that he killed them and took their uteri back to the hospital to study in an attempt to cure his wife's, infertility. there's no proof of this, okay? This is just a theory. But to me, that theory makes sense.
It doesn't make sense. Like,
Why doesn't it make sense?
not many of these women had children. Why would he take their...
Well, to study their uterus, if they didn't have children, it's a possibility that they were also infertile. He couldn't very well cut his wife open and check her out.
I guess in my head, I think you would want to look at healthy uterus versus
But you want to see
unhealthy
what's
uterus.
wrong
But I
with
get
it.
that.
You know
I
what
get
I'm
that.
saying? Yeah.
I mean, now some of them did have kids that I don't think were in their care. I hope were not, based on the things I read.
Maybe it was like he took both healthy and unhealthy because he wanted to compare the two.
Yeah.
You know, so
and that would make sense if you're taking, because I was just thinking off the bat, most of them didn't have kids, but there was one lady that had kids for sure, and I don't know about one of the others. A lot of them didn't have kids, which is why it was like, well, that's strange. But if you take women that, because also,
if you take
what if there were
women,
other victims that weren't found?
Well, exactly, and if you take poor women that are what would probably be considered burdens to society back then, to study on, unfortunately, if you look far enough, and again, unfortunately, it's not that far, many women who were considered burdens to society or undesirables were used in the history of gynecology.
Oh, absolutely. No, definitely. And I mean, that theory makes more sense to me than pretty much any of the others, even though I like the royal family retribution
I don't know. I like
theory.
the idea of it being
It's
a girl.
fun.
Of it being
I
a
do
woman.
like the one because, like, they made good points. Like, a woman posing as a midwife can walk around London covered in blood.
Yep.
With bloody rags and,
Or a midwife themselves would know about the inside.
Well, right. And that was what I was thinking. But, like, the theory from the detectives back then was that, she was posing as a midwife. But a midwife would know where the organs are. And that's, like, my biggest thing is I feel like maybe a butcher of animals would be able to find the organs in a human. But otherwise, these women were butchered in that they weren't hacked to pieces, except for one or two of the earliest victims, which is why they're not really attributed to the 5 canonical victims, because they don't match the MO exactly. However, one of them was in the exact same position because they have their legs splayed as a woman giving childbirth, which feeds right into what you said about Dr. Williams and why. Because almost every single victim, her legs were splayed wide as if, and like possibly slightly bent. The way it was described was the position for giving childbirth. So
which is why I'm like the doctor, like that guy. I'm like
that one makes perfect sense because I personally believe it has to be somebody with medical background or some such thing similar to that because they were not just hacked to pieces; they were cut up and pieces of them were removed and taken with the killer. They had their throats slit, a lot of them, which is why nobody heard any noise. Like, most of these women were found where they were killed, which means they were killed and butchered, dismembered, dissected, however you want to look at that, in a specific place without being heard right outside a residence. Like, Whitechapel is, when you think about, like, okay, you know how San Francisco has the building upon building upon building, or, like, you think Brooklyn, the Bronx, or whatever, where it's, like, just building upon building upon building, all these apartments, all these little houses, all together, squished together. This is what Whitechapel's like, right? It's a very poor area. And these women were killed, like, in doorways. And, like, one was found in, like, the landing of an apartments, basically. But, like, obviously it's not, like, our apartments. It's, like, apartments used to be. So it wasn't, like, enclosed, but it was probably, like, the stairwell was blocked off by walls of the buildings, So it's kind of enclosed, but it's not, like, inside, right? Right. So it's, like, right outside the doors of residence. Right on the other side of the wall from people, like, sleeping and just living life, right? At least one was found in the yard of a house. So, like, right there. Like, and people were coming and going, too, because this is a part of the town that, I'm not going to say it's like Vegas and it never sleeps, but also, there are dock workers that are getting out at 3 and 4 in the morning.
Mhm.
There are people there are soldiers that are on leave trying to get a little booty from women like our victims here, you know? It's a part of town it's still going in the wee hours when these women were dispatched. So, like, there are at least 2 accounts where people went in and out of the buildings that these women were found dead in front of, and they're like, it was really dark. I mean, there was definitely nobody alive there, but I could have missed a dead body.
Well, and the reality is, though, it was such a shitty place. Would it be that unusual to see a dead body on the ground? I don't think
that
so.
was one. Well, and not
You know?
necessarily
Or
a dead body.
drunk.
Exactly,
Or
a
a
drunk
drunk.
or a passed out, because that's exactly what one guy said about one of the bodies was like, I think I saw a body there, but like I often see somebody sleeping there.
Right, sleeping or
or sleeping off a drunk, either way, because it's a bad part of town. It's a bad part of town. Whitechapel was bad. London's East End was bad. And this particular time that the crimes happened in, I had no fucking idea until you suggested this episode, which is so much fun to me because I've always watched documentaries about Jack the Ripper.
Ooh.
But like 1888 was a cold, wet summer. So the bank holiday that the first Jack the Ripper murder happened at, like, it was so wet, nobody could go out and do stuff. Everybody wound up in pubs drinking and stuff because, like, it was like there were newspaper images, like people drew like cartoons of people like rowing through the streets of London because there was that much rain.
Well, and
in
okay,
this, like, and that's
and this
directly
is
leading
East
up
End,
to
right?
this. Yes.
East End. Okay, so Call the Midwife, which I talk about all the time, takes place in East End, London.
In what year?
The 50s and the 60s
Okay.
and the 40s.
I just wasn't sure. I
know I'm looking at you like that because I'm like, and it wasn't any better.
Yeah,
that's what's fucked up.
Yeah, no.
But there were characters. I say characters, but it's based on a book that starts with an M.
Memoirs.
Memoirs.
Okay, I was like, I do not know the name of this book. What?
It's based on a couple memoirs of the actual woman who was a midwife in the East End. So
Maybe
I
she's
say
the granddaughter of Jane the Ripper.
Well, I say
Ripper.
characters, but they're real people. Like there was this old woman that she lived on East End her entire life, going back to the 1880s around this time. And she just screamed in her sleep because it was so fucking horrible to live there. Like, it was so bad. Her kids had died because of the, way that they were living. Like, it was not good.
I don't know if London East End is good right now, but when I was growing up, I remember that's where, like, the gangs of London were and shit like that, at least according to pop culture. It's always been so shitty.
And it's sad because back then, at least as described in Call the Midwife, so this would be in the 1900s, not the late 1800s, but very similar.
And I did not grow up in the 1800s, guys.
It was overrun with children because there was no birth control back then. So women who were prostituting themselves, like our victims, or women who were even married, back then it didn't matter if you said yes or no to your husband. They were getting pregnant one right after the other, after the other, after the other, and it was just causing these. It was awful. Birth control saved East End London. I'm sorry, I don't mean to get on that.
Well, no,
I don't.
Like,
but
London's
it really did.
East End is bad, and so like it wasn't any better in the first half of the 1900s. And not even all of the second half of the 1900s, and it was bad in the 1800s, and like
it was generational curses.
Yes.
People are being born into this,
and I mean, if you think about it, like Jack the Ripper has haunted London ever since the first Ripper murder happened, and like if you think about it from that standpoint. Has Jack the Ripper's curse just continued to invade the space of East End? Because London's Lower East End is historically bad, and now I'm curious what it's like now. Because if our few British listeners are like, "Fuck you guys," it's not bad here. Like I am curious. I never... East End of London. Still not good.
Still not good.
Still not good.
Oh my
Still
god,
not
listen to
generally
this.
hailed as a good place to be.
Lewis Carroll,
Is
Was-
one of the possible suspects.
the author of Alice in Wonderland.
Same with a known serial killer, George Burroughs, I think is his name. But he was a known serial killer.
I hear the
Uh,
author of Alice in Wonderland was a fucking weirdo, though. Like, I hear he was a straight up
You know,
creepoid.
Because he
had
was he a
naked
creep?
pictures of little girls.
He had
he-
naked pictures.
Yes,
of
he
girls?
would draw them himself. So, like, I only know this because I had looked up this author. He would draw them himself, and their mothers would let him keep them for a little bit while he drew these pictures of her because it was art of them because it was art. Like, the guy was definitely like on the P side of the
Maybe I'm thinking of the Winnie the Pooh guy.
maybe because Lewis
Because one of the children's authors that was thought to be like creepy, he was really nice to kids, and people were like, "Well, you're fucked up if you're nice to children." But this is back when we sent children into mines to die.
maybe it
They were
was
seen
like
as commodities.
I think that may have been the Winnie the Pooh guy because I know that the Alice in Wonderland, the fact that he wrote about Alice, I'm pretty sure Alice was. I may be wrong, so don't
She
quote
was a
me.
girl he knew.
But she was a
neighbor.
girl. Yes, and that was the girl that he took those.
I
pictures of.
wonder if
So
the
he was,
guy
like,
in the
obsessed.
Magician's books, the author that they say ruined the children of the book in the Magicians, because I wonder if he's based on Lewis Carroll, because it was I don't know if you've ever read the books or watched the show The
Mm-mm.
Magicians, but shout out Dustin. Rewatch Recap did a thing
Mm-hmm.
on The Magicians. Actually, he's covered the first 2 seasons. And so I'm personally on season 3 of watching. But,
Mhm.
the thing is about, this fantasy world that's not a fantasy world. It's actually real.
Mhm.
And, these people who are able to access magic, they got, into a special school, whatever. This one guy, he's obsessed with these books. He finds his way into Fillory. Quentin finds his way into Fillory. And Julia doesn't in the version of life that we have to start the book, or to start the show at least. I've never read the books yet, sorry. Anyway, the author guy that wrote the books about Fillory, because the children that were his neighbors who were orphaned when their parents died, moved into his house, and he found out all about Fillory from them and got rich writing these books, but he also abused at least the boy.
Oh
the-
God.
Younger boy, the older boy?
Well, and I just
Both
I had to
boys?
look up the Lewis Carroll thing. I was right when that was so
okay, so
it
it's
was
the Winnie the
it
Pooh
was-
guy I'm
Okay,
thinking of.
but this guy James Matthew Barry was also a weirdo, and he
Mhm.
wrote Peter Pan. So are we that surprised? I mean, it's Peter Pan. I feel like I'm less surprised.
I feel
about
like the
Peter.
Pinocchio guy's gotta be fucking
Oh
weird.
God damn! I hate Pinocchio. It's fucking
So
weird.
sad.
I'm sorry, I can't do Pinocchio because it's weird. Like.
Look,
So my point is, I guess I could see him as Jack the Ripper if he was a creep, but not really because I'm gonna be disgusting and awful when I say this. But the victims were adult women, so I don't think it would be Lewis Carroll.
I'm just over here my childhood is fucked up by this conversation.
I'm
So-
sorry.
No, you're fine. It's just I'm over here does everybody that write books for kids just be like that? Just a child diddler? Because I can't handle that truth. Please tell me
Stop!
the truth.
I've had 3
Do
kids, and
not
I'm
let
about
that
to
be a
pee my
truth.
pants with that laugh.
Do not let that be a truth. That's all I'm saying. I can't handle that truth.
Maybe back then, but no, I don't think so now.
Anyway.
Anyway.
But, yeah, so there are a lot of there are a lot of famous people that were thought to be Jack the
Yeah.
Ripper.
Well,
there
this
were
one's like
other
a Hollywood
killers who were thought to
producer.
be Jack the Ripper.
Mm-hmm.
There was a woman who was possibly Jack the Ripper.
Nobody knew. Nobody had any idea.
Nobody did.
Back in the olden days when you could get away with stuff. Like nowadays, not unfortunately, I mean fortunately.
Well, nowadays we have DNA evidence, which everybody thinks is infallible, but but it is not if you watch enough true crime like I do.
I
to
guess
know.
that brings us to the
Current
final.
era.
Yes.
Well, I mean, I don't. Yeah, I mean, he's the final.
Well, he's not. I meant the final for this episode. But like anyway, so the guy, just because we're at 25, but so his name's like Aaron something, Polish Jewish immigrant. He came from Germany, came to London. He was a barber. Supposedly they connected.
He
his
was
DNA.
insane.
Yes, he was insane.
And he wound
died.
up in a mental hospital in 1891, where he ended up dying like 20 plus 30 years later.
Which sucks because mental institutions back then were not good.
And his relative, who is writing a book about Jack the Ripper and his great uncle being Jack the Ripper, released a shawl that is thought to be Catherine Eddowes's that has her DNA and mitochondrial DNA from the Kosminski family. And Aaron Kosminski was one of the suspects back in the day. And so the DNA evidence shows that Kosminski's mitochondrial DNA is on a shawl that also has Catherine Eddowes' DNA, according to the labs that tested it. But what everybody doesn't realize about DNA is it's not 100% accurate. Like, there are scientists that would say DNA should not be allowed in a court of law today on current era DNA samples. So
honestly,
like, it's over 100 years old, and DNA breaks down. Like, I find it highly suspect. I mean, maybe they did solve Jack the Ripper. Maybe they really did, but I'm not sold because it's just mitochondrial DNA. She was a lady of the evening that he was known to experience, and so were his brothers, according to what I read when we were talking about it earlier, and I looked it up to see, like, is somebody profiting from the fact that this is happening? The DNA, that is. But what I read said, like, he and his brothers both experienced the embrace of Catherine Eddowes, so it makes sense their DNA would be on the shawl.
So I'm not going to dismiss the fact, okay?
Yeah,
I'm not going to dismiss it at all. I'm not going to say that I fully believe it because I don't, but I'm not going to like die on this hill that I think it's not this person.
Oh yeah, no.
You know, like the idea of him being a barber again, like we got Sweeney Todd, man. We got Sweeney Todd, like
another Johnny Depp.
Literally,
again, another Johnny Depp, if he leaned into that character, would have better teeth today.
I'm just saying, like, isn't that how Sweeney Todd, you know, his victims?
But Sweeney Todd didn't, like, dissect them and cut their organs
He just fed them to people. He just ground them
he
up.
just gave them to
Mrs. Lovett.
So that she could grind them up.
But the thing is, we don't know anything about the history of Aaron before he moved to London. Like you had mentioned previously, did they own a farm? It's highly possible if they owned a farm that he had to perform emergency C-sections on animals. Does that mean the mom's going to live? No, but we are going to save a calf instead of losing a cow and the calf. Pigs are very similar to humans as well. You could have or he could have been a straight psychopath and just cutting into them.
But he didn't just cut it.
No, I'm talking about the animals.
Oh,
so
animals.
He learned something about that, you know?
I mean, like, in his mental state, he was this far away from a mental hospital stay. Can you really dissect a human body in the dark without being caught by all the people right around you?
So there's this theory.
I find that highly suspect.
There's another theory. I do think so, absolutely. If you are so fucking insane, I really do think so.
No, I don't think you're going to have steady enough hands to do the cuts.
Well, see, that's where I disagree. Because, like, there is a theory that people with mental health disorders, people who have these issues, you know, they kind of almost convince themselves. And so when they're convincing themselves that, like, what they're doing is not bad, they're not shaken, they're not scared.
Oh, but
you know
no.
I mean?
It's that when you have a neurological issue, like mental health issues and mind issues, are your hands going to be steady enough to make surgical incisions in the dark? Like, I'm not saying because he thought what he was doing was wrong.
Mhm.
I'm saying because if he was so unwell, could he have accomplished what Jack the Ripper did?
I do
and
think
I don't
so,
think
because
so.
look at the surgeries done, for example, at the Holocaust. You know, I'm sure that they kept their hands pretty fucking, like, chill, but they were still obviously insane and cutting into people. You know what I mean?
Different kind of insanity.
You think so? What's the
Yeah.
difference? They're both cutting in and dissecting
Well,
people.
the Nazis were they didn't see them as people, for one.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that they were insane and crazy like Mr. Kosminski was. Kosminski was insane. That doesn't mean he was an evil person.
Mhm.
Just because he got put in a mental institution
Sad.
doesn't mean that he was an awful, evil Nazi like the Nazis were, who were able to do what they did because they were convinced that somehow they were better than everyone else and that what they were doing was to non-humans. If this person saw them as non-human, which is very possible, no matter who it was that was Jack the Ripper, I mean, they were unfortunates.
Mhm.
Whoever did this to them probably didn't see them as people,
Mhm.
you know, whether they were insane or not. But
I
I
hope
would
that
never.
wasn't a shitty comparison. I wasn't
I
trying
would never
to
compare. Like,
you
I
know,
just-
like
I
I
don't.
just, you know, I guess like you said, maybe they weren't insane those. But I do think an insane person can have a totally steady hand. I mean, look at
I just mean, like, in the conditions, in the dark, it seems to me like it would be I feel like, but then it would have
But
to
if
be
he
somebody
had-
that can blend in, right?
Right.
Because-
Well, and if they had practice, like let's say this guy was crazy and he had been practicing on animals. This is my own fucking thought. I have no idea what this guy did in the past, okay? It's likely they could have had animals. I don't know. Could have been people fucking grab cats and they dissect cats off the fucking street, dude. You know what I mean? He very well could have been somebody like that.
There is nothing in any record that he
no,
was
there's
like
not.
that.
There's not. I'm just saying, like, him not being a surgeon doesn't, in my head, disclose him just because that they were.
Well,
like,
getting
opened
a
certain
hold of
way.
a knife that is long and slender like that. Again, these were poor people. Like, having the
Sounds like a barber.
okay, but like these people borrowed combs from each other. That's how
Mhm.
poor they were. Like,
Mhm.
literally.
Mhm.
Like, there are things in the stories about, like, one of the neighbors that loaned one of the victims a comb so she could do her hair before she went out, because they're so poor they don't even own their own comb. One of them was having a fight with one of her roommates, or not roommates, but they all lived in the same boarding house, over soap that was borrowed and not returned, because that's how poor they are. So when you go, that's like a razor, that's presuming they have a razor.
Well, if
like,
he's a barber, he's got to have a razor.
I mean, that's true. If he's a barber, he's got to have a razor. That is very true. I wasn't thinking about that. I'm just thinking about, like, he doesn't have access to a whole lot. And I guess they probably wouldn't care about a bunch of dissected cats. Would they care? Had they gotten over
there's
cats
no
being
proof for that. To
superstitious?
be clear, there's no proof for that. That's just
I'm just saying, like, I do not
possibility.
think that anybody without some kind of surgical background would be able, in the darkness, so quickly without getting caught. But they would also have to be able to blend in. Although, did a lot of rich guys come and get a little some down in East End? I don't really know.
I really think I like. First of all, I just had a disgusting thought, and I hate it because of this conversation. Because I just thought, what does a cat uterus look like versus a human uterus? Because if they're practicing on animals, but I don't want to know. Is that a psychotic thought? Because, like, I'm not trying to be crazy. It's just like the difference in an animal uterus versus a human uterus. If you're dissecting an animal, not just a cat, but a pig.
Yeah.
Again, I think pig would probably be the closest too. But it's not the exact same. I don't really want to, you know what I'm saying? Like,
I get what you're saying. I'm just like, I'm over here like,
I think the idea that it's a doctor doing it to see what's wrong with his wife and why she's infertile is probably the most likely theory that I lean towards.
I just, in the dark. But, like, what if it's somebody that's got medical knowledge, but they're not somebody like a soldier that
That
also
yeah,
has medical
exactly.
knowledge.
It could have been
And they would
someone
blend in
war.
down there because
Mhm.
soldiers go in there all the time. I'm just like, it couldn't be like a rich guy, right? Because how are you going to blend in down there?
Mhm.
You're going to stand out like a sore thumb. Now, 2 of them were seen talking to a dude with a little mustache, though, who apparently did not blend in at all. And it's like, I don't know. Because of all the true crime I've watched,
Mhm.
DNA evidence is not that, it's not how people think it is,
Mhm.
right? Where it's like, oh, we're going to bring DNA evidence into this courtroom and everything's going to be solved. Like, that's not how it is, according to the scientists that perform DNA stuff. So for 140-year-old DNA to say that this guy did it based on mitochondrial DNA and his brothers, who would have had the same mitochondrial DNA, being there, and he was a known visitor of these ladies.
Yeah, maybe.
The DNA does not sway me. It doesn't. If nobody would profit from it, it would sway me a lot more, and I realize that's my own bias. 100% my own bias. If nobody was profiting from that DNA release, I would for sure find it more interesting than I do. It's not that I don't find it
Capitalism.
credible. It's that I find it disinteresting because I know that DNA is not foolproof. It's only mitochondrial, and somebody is profiting from it being released after 140 years.
I think that that's a great way to end this episode. What do you think? Just because I know you
Yeah.
said we want to keep it about the same length as the other one, right?
Oh no, that's the next episode. Check
What
out
the
Alistair
fuck?
Cowling.
I've been over here watching the time
I
like
was
a
like,
goddamn
when you said it was like 25, I was like, yeah, but we figured this
I
one was
know,
going to be
I'm
like
so
25.
That's
No,
why
you're
I
good.
said that. I've been watching the time like a hawk to make sure that we didn't go over a certain amount, and that's for the wrong episode, you guys. I don't know what the fuck I was
That's
thinking.
okay. That's all right. That's all
That's why you gave me that look,
I
because
was
you
like,
did make a look, and I was like,
I was
you said it! What the fuck?
I was so confused. I was like, but I figured this was going to be the longer of the 2.
I know, I'm
week.
so sorry.
And it probably still is.
I
can't
think
see.
so.
I
Well,
don't
with
know.
that being said, what are your thoughts on Jack the Ripper? Do you have your own theory? Did you think any theory that we mentioned makes sense to you? Or are you a diehard for the DNA that was recently released? Let us know in the comments. If you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to like and subscribe. You can find us on I'm sorry, no you can't. You can find us on Facebook, Threads, and Instagram at Witches Talking Tarot.
And you can find us on the X at Classiest Witches, because we are the classiest witches you know. So big shout out and thank you to Death by DVD
Pam.
and Victoria. We appreciate your patronage on patreon.com/Witches Talking Tarot. And if you guys want a spiffy little shout out, you heard where you can go. So
Thanks for sitting with us for a spell.
bye.